Welcome to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network with your hostess, Jen Josey. Join like-minded real estate investors and accelerate your business towards greatness. You will hear step-by-step strategies for success, interviews with real estate rock stars, and we will dig deep into past projects where we bear it all, including the good, the bad, and some just plain ugly. So get excited. Here's the bestower of badassery herself, the real Jen Josey. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen Josey, creator of RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Whoop, whoop. On today's episode, we have a guest that will be sharing their badassery. But before we begin, here's today's badassery bestowment, my little badass gift to you. Today's topic is why every badass investor should introduce themselves to the neighbors. When you start a house flipping project, it's easy to focus on contractors, budgets, timelines, but don't overlook the people living right next door. Introducing yourself to the neighbors isn't just polite, it's a strategic move that can make or break your project. Here are 5 reasons why every badass investor should take the time to meet the neighbors. Number 1, builds goodwill. A friendly introduction sets the tone and helps neighbors see you as approachable and considerate. This goodwill can go a long way if any issues arise during the renovation. Number 2, reduces complaints. Renovations can be noisy and disruptive. By giving neighbors a heads up and sharing your timeline, you show respect for their space, which can lead to fewer complaints and smoother operations. Number 3, and my favorite, creates extra security. Neighbors can act as an extra set of eyes on your property. If they see anything suspicious, they're more likely to alert you if they feel involved and informed. Number 4, leads to referrals. Neighbors often know others in the area who might be looking to sell or invest. Your introduction could open doors to future deals or even buyers for your finished project. And number 5, enhances your reputation. Word spreads fast in neighborhoods. Being known as the investor who cares about the community can boost your reputation and make future projects in the area more welcome. So, take the time to knock on a few doors and introduce yourself. A badass investor knows that real estate isn't just about properties, it's about people. By building relationships with neighbors, you're not just flipping a house, you're creating a positive experience for the entire community. And who knows, that small effort may lead you to your next big opportunity. Now, on to today's episode of the Real Estate Investor Growth Network podcast. Today we have Mike Simpson, a distinguished civil and geotechnical engineer with over 30 years experience. As the founder of Desert Foundation Forensic Engineering, Mike specializes in forensic evaluations and expert witness testimony, helping homeowners navigate foundation failures with cost-effective, tailored solutions. His career highlights include spearheading multi-million-dollar projects and serving as FEMA's Infrastructure Branch Director Chief in Puerto Rico, where he guided billion-dollar disaster relief efforts. Renowned for his expertise in soil engineering and foundation design, we are happy to have him on the show. So welcome, Mike Simpson.
Whoop, whoop.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I don't quite have the pitch, but that's all right.
Well, welcome, sir. Happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here. And we had one of your friends on recently, back a few months ago, and you also have similar expertise in engineering, but my listeners can't hear it enough how important foundations can be to make or break a project. So let's start from the beginning, Mike. How did you get involved with engineering?
Oh, well, first of all, very nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
My uncle was a structural engineer, and I used to go to his office in Santa Barbara and hang out there. And I just thought, well, he's cool, so this is cool. And then, so I went to college for engineering. And then I found out I didn't really love structural engineering, so I ended up in geotechnical engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is that? I mean, I want you to finish your story, but what is geotechnical?
So essentially, when you look at everybody gets their degree in civil engineering when you're in these, and then civil engineering has branches, and it includes structural engineering, geotechnical engineering, transportation, like everything infrastructure related. There's branches of civil engineering. So
Gotcha.
structural is a branch, geotechnical is a branch. And if you want to think about building like houses or vertical construction, geotechnical has everything from basically the ground down, and the structural takes it from there up, generally speaking.
Very good. All right, well,
Um,
keep going. Thank you
yeah,
for solving that
sure.
mystery for my brain. Appreciate
Yeah,
it. Keep going.
yeah. So I ended up coming out of college, and I was blessed to come out in the middle of a recession, and the only engineering firms were hiring at that time was geotech. So I started doing that. Geotech has two components. One is new construction. They'll go out, they'll with the drill rig, get samples, bring it back, and then and do earth, like give the recommendations for how to prepare the earth or where bedrock is, things like that. And then the structural engineer can take it from there. So I was cutting my teeth on that, but at the same time, we would get called out to look at a lot of houses that are and buildings that had distress, which kind of leads to the next thing, which is forensic engineering. Why is the building that's there having problems? And it usually, more often than not, comes back to a problem with the earth shifting or the foundation settling. So that's why a lot of geotechnical engineers are forensic engineers, and that's how I got into this. Um,
Interesting.
yeah.
Very, very cool.
Uh,
Keep going. Sorry.
yeah. So to kind of finish off the how I ended up here, I started an engineering company in 1997. For a person to be a professional engineer, they first have to have a degree. Then they have to. Most states require 4 years of training under an engineer as an engineer in training, and then you go take the test and become a professional engineer. The So once I got my professional engineer's license, I started a civil engineering company here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I had it for about 10 years. The '08 bubble hit, and it hit everything development related. And I found these FEMA contracts because a hurricane just hit Louisiana. And so I deployed out to that, figuring I'd be out there for 6 months. And 15 years later, so I started on, I moved down to New Orleans and worked on Katrina for a decade,
Wow.
that's all forensic engineering at that point. You're figuring out what's hurricane damage, what's existing damage, what's just normal wear and tear. And so from there, I went to Puerto Rico for Maria, and I actually took a job straight with FEMA at that point. I'd sold the company that I had owned in Arizona, and I worked there for about 4 years. There were the earthquakes also, if you recall, in 2019.
Hmm.
So, and there was a lot. I was in charge of all the infrastructure recovery. So the power grid, the roads, the water, the sewer. At one point, I was just in charge of all the schools. And you think, oh, Puerto Rico, how many schools? They have the third largest school district in the country. So there's 1,110 public schools, and with over 8,000 buildings. The University of Puerto Rico has 12 campuses, or
Wow.
is it eight? Yeah, with over 800 buildings. So there was a lot, and we were looking at a lot of different types of damages. COVID hit. It's always these big events, the '08 and then COVID. So I came back to Arizona, and I was working remotely, and I realized I didn't really want to go back to Puerto Rico. And you'd had RK Bob Brown on, and I was, as a side kind of hustle, I was working for him, doing evaluating. He would give me what they were proposing for repairs and distressed residential structures. So I just said, all right, Bob, I'll come just kind of do it for you full time. And so I was doing that. And then he sold the company. And so I was like, all right, well, now here I am doing this just to help homeowners really, and flippers, because there's a lot of repairs that are being pushed that are not necessary. And then there's others that are extreme. So,
Wow, that was a lot. And thank you
yeah.
for all that time in Puerto Rico, because I know that was a hot mess. And then with Katrina. So I'm just curious with the whole geotechnical aspect of it, which is the ground. I can remember our first property that we purchased had a buried oil tank. So is that stuff that can affect, because Like, what causes the earth to disrupt a structure? Give me some examples of that.
Sure. So first of all, it's always water.
I literally wrote water on my paper. I'm like, I
It's
know it's
always
got to be
water.
water.
You
Yes.
know, so I would say it's water, and then the number two culprit is fill. So if you have backfill, anytime people like in Louisiana to get water above the flood zone, you'll stack a bunch of fill and to build it up higher, but that fill wants to settle,
Right.
especially when water hits it. So, and then backfill behind basements, that's a spot where you get a lot of settlement type issues. So the more you can be in native materials, they've had more time to settle and consolidate, and they usually tend to be more stable. And then as soon as we start disrupting it, that's where the problem comes. So like even with your example of the oil tank, I'm sure it was for heating. When you have that, you have fill around it, and then when somebody pulls one out, and let's say they go to natural gas or something, well now you have this hole, or even a pool, like a pool in the back that somebody backfilled. If it wasn't backfilled and compacted and tested as they did it, you're going to get settlement in those areas.
Interesting. So when we were buying that house, we saw the pipe sticking up out of the ground, and people are like, "Oh, you have a buried oil tank," but that's more of like an environmentalist to see if it's spread. That's not what you do, but
Right.
it would definitely disrupt the shifting of the earth by removing it. So I get that. So random question: what causes sinkholes then?
Well, so sinkholes is a term where it can mean a variety of things. In the traditional sense, it would be limestone that's dissolving and creating karst, and whatever. That's a traditional geologic sinkhole. But a lot of times you see cars fall in there. Oh, it fell in a sinkhole, and that usually is like a sewer line that broke and hauled up, and so all the soil's going down through the sewer line and getting washed out, and then the hole opens up. In Arizona, we have a geologic condition where we get fissures, and that's where you probably get them in North Carolina too. Anywhere you have like mountains, and as the alluvial material slides down the mountain over at a geologic pace, so over thousands and millions of years, as it slides down, it starts to separate, almost like you would see a glacier get open crevices. The
Right.
same thing happens with alluvial material on mountains as it slides down. So you get fissures, and people sometimes call those sinkholes.
Huh.
So it depends. Obviously, if you're in Florida, it's probably the limestone issue, or like I said, if it's in the street, it's a sewer line opened up, and it's all washing all the material out.
I grew up in Florida, so I'm familiar with sinkholes there, but I'm in North Carolina now, and we have a historic
Mhm.
neighborhood across the way. They had a random sinkhole and it swallowed a car. And I mean, it was like a big
Uh,
deal. So I was like, and we have a lot of
wow.
red clay up here too. So that's why it's like,
Yeah.
that's a first for me hearing about that in
It's
North Carolina. But
sounds like it might have been a sewer line
okay.
that yeah, or even though like the water line breaks, it's going to start squirting water everywhere, washing everything out, and then it just opens up a big hole till they can get it shut down.
So let's go back to water because I have always heard that as an investor, sometimes we have opportunities to buy properties that have suffered from a fire. And I have always been told the fire isn't the damaging part, it's the water that put out the fire. Now, something for that short term, is that going to cause anything structurally if it was, I mean, it's not completely burned down to the ground, but they did have to water down the entire house to put out the fire.
Yeah, it depends. Like I would say, from a geotechnical standpoint, the soil probably not, because
Okay.
the kind of the rule of thumb. First of all, the house probably had, if it was graded properly, the water's going to be washing away from the foundations, and it probably didn't pool up for more say than 24 hours before it
Okay.
either washed away or evaporated off. And then sometimes it depends also like on your geologic setting. And this is the thing where geotechnical engineers are important, local geotechnical engineers, because they know the geology and the geologic risks, like sinkholes, like fissures, like so for the instance in Arizona, the soils are dry for the most part, unless you're maybe up in the mountains. So you want to stay dry. It's called, in engineering terms, it's dry of optimum or wet of optimum. So in like say East Texas, you probably want to be wet of optimum. So if you had a fire and they were spraying water on it, that soil's already wet anyways. It lives in a wet way all the time. Whereas in Arizona, soils are always dry, and so if getting water under that foundation becomes problematic. So that would be the example.
Thank you for debunking that mystery in my brain, Mike. I appreciate that because I remember that from coaches a couple years ago. And
Yeah.
so I've been weary of buying a firehouse, not a fire department. You know what I'm saying? All right, so let's talk about some projects that you have going on right now and put this into like real world situations. What do you do in your day-to-day activities working with homeowners and real estate investors? Give me a few examples.
Yeah. So one of the reasons we started the company is that I'm not anti-foundation company, by the way. They have a very important role and they have very good products for fixing things. But if you bring them out, they'll tend to find a problem where there's not a problem. So two projects we did just last week, we saved those homeowners about $40,000 a piece because they were recommending piers, about 10 piers each in each of these homes, and they didn't need them. So we went out and we did what's called a level A assessment. That's where you go out and look at it and don't do a lot of measuring, just kind of walk it, get an understanding of what's going on, look at documents that they may have, and then just kind of look at the cracking and some other things that are going on in its setting. And then also the USDA has soil maps, and so we can get a good idea of what the soils are for that vicinity. So one of them we looked at, it's on a hillside. It's very gravelly, sandy material, which gravels and sands don't really want to settle. They settle. So there's three kinds of settlement. I'm just going to backstep here. There's a settlement that happens, the initial settlement, which happens in construction. And then there's an initial consolidation. So more fine-grained soils like clays and silts will have a longer consolidation. It'll take several years to happen. And then there's even the secondary consolidation. So those fine-grained soils may even take decades or may never stop moving at all, but they move much slower in that. So when you're on a hillside and you're not dealing with clays, there's the consolidation, especially old homes, that all that should have happened already. So if there's something going on, the question is, where's the water coming from? Because that something happened to make it wet. So that leads me into the second home we looked at. It was a 1970s home, and a horizontal crack appeared in the stucco. And I mean, the bad stucco job aside, it had moved. But when I talked to him, he was in the middle of digging a trench next to the house for his new irrigation line to replace the old irrigation line. And I asked him, did the old irrigation line leak? And he goes, well, probably. And I go, well, that's why you have a new crack. So instead of buying piers and doing all these things, now that you've identified the leak and you stop the leak, when the soil dries out, the shear strength will return to it and it should stop moving. So what I want you to do, I told him, is I want you to take a picture with something of scale next to the crack and just in 6 months, 9 months, look at it again, compare it to the picture. And if it's not moving, then you definitely don't need to do piers. So gutters solve a lot of problems. And in Arizona, nobody likes to put gutters up, but they solve a lot of problems. So that's the second one. The third one is that I'm going to be dealing with it today. There's a saying, bad news doesn't get better with time. And so this is what I'm doing. So I tried to hustle this one out. This house it's about $1.5 million house that years ago I was out there looking at it. We measured the floor elevations. We gave them some kind of starter ideas to see what, to help the settlement that was going on. And then, I don't know, COVID happened, a lot of things that now they're getting ready to sell. And we went out and they lost a buyer because there was cracking throughout the house. And so we went out to look at it again, remeasured it. It's moved up to about a half inch in a lot of locations. So it's moving about 1/10 of an inch a year. And so, and it's everywhere. And so the repairs and this is the other thing with a geotechnical engineer or a forensic engineer comes in. If you call a foundation company, they have a set of items, proprietary piers or proprietary methods that they use, and they all have different ones. So when you bring an engineer in, they can decide kind of which will be the optimal repair style. So like in the case of this one, there's the polyurethane foam that you can now inject into the ground.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and then not just under the slab, but you can now go 8, 10 feet down, inject it, expand the soil out, tighten all that soil up. So on this case, I've given them three scenarios. One is this high density polyurethane foam that they would do it all the way around. I mean, you have to do a 4 foot grid inside the house, so it's messy, but I mean, you still got to pull the flooring up and all that stuff, but you don't have to pull the slab up. You just drill the slab. Um, Gave them that solution. Another one I gave them was if you piered it and then also put a low mobility grout. Again, you don't have to pull the slab up, but you're going to drill it, and cost with that, an engineer's estimate, not the actual cost. And then the other option they have was to full R&R of the slab, but that doesn't fix the foundation. That just fixes the slab movements. So,
What are the costs for some of those?
yeah, sure. The rough cost on this polyurethane, I just did the square foot model of the house being roughly 4,000 square feet, and then about $25 a square foot, roughly. So that'll be 125,000 for them, roughly.
Woo.
But the piers, as you're aware, I think they're about 2,500 to 3,000 a piece.
Right.
And when you talk a house that big, you're looking at 65 piers probably.
But is it on slab?
Well, you have a conventional footing with slab on grade. So you still have to figure out the slab. So even once you get the 65 piers in that stops the perimeter from moving, then you still have to stabilize the underneath it. So you're either going to do that polyurethane, high density polyurethane, or you're going to do a low mobility grout.
Did you say 65 piers?
Yeah, that would be what that one would need.
Oh
yeah.
Gosh.
And then part of it is, so we're just right now kind of this is the other thing I would want your listeners to know. It's not, they can't come out. An engineer really shouldn't be coming out once. Once is to so what we did was we just measured it. Okay, we know it's moving. We've confirmed it's moving now. And we have a good idea of where it's moving. But the next thing is we have to test the soil, because I think we can reduce the number of piers and we can reduce some of this grouting in locations, but we can't know that until we get soil samples. So the next step is to bring the geotechnical work into the project, and then refine the design plan, right? And then go out to bid, right? So most homeowners don't have that kind of patience. Or even a flipper. I mean, that's money. I mean, it's not just the money that it's costing, it's time, right? So it's like, well, wait a minute, this part takes this long and this part takes this long. As the engineer, there's a lot I can do about that. And this is what I'm saying, like, bad news doesn't get better with time. I need to let them know straight away so that they can figure out their next move. Yeah.
Don't want to be listening to that call that you have to make. Wow, goodness, that's a lot. So for the listeners, many of them are newer investors and they're looking at projects and they'll see, say, a crack in the corner of a door going up, or outside, if it's a brick house, they'll see shifting, like maybe it's a horizontal crack, or sometimes if it's a stair step crack. So when does a real estate investor need to call a geotechnical, I have to look at the word, make sure I'm saying it right, a geotechnical or forensics engineer?
Yeah, I would say you got to look at the big picture. So if you just see one crack here and there, but it could be, so like the house, they were getting ready to sell it. So of course they went through it and they patched everything. So when we went back out there to look at it, it looks like it's in good shape, but really it's not. It's all hidden. It's all buried behind some patching and things. So I think if I was looking, first of all, if I was a flipper, I'd probably getting into a house that doesn't have that kind of patching. The person just wants to sell it and then let the flipper do all the work. So that's good, because you can now see if the cracks are endemic or if it's just one location and one little thing. So that's number one. Is it if you just see one crack, probably nothing. And then also maybe, so when would you call? I would say if you see something that like if you see not, I would say if the crack hairline, no. If it's more than, say, the width of a nickel, then the question mark comes in your head, right? And I mean the thickness of a nickel, not the.
Yes.
And then if it's, like, say, more than a 1/4 inch, yes, you want to take a look. That said, I went out and looked at this family was worried about, they just pulled some carpeting up because they're going to redo this. And there was a half-inch thick crack in the slab, which is pretty normal in Arizona to have. So I looked at it and I just said, and we did some measurements around and it was fine. It's just there was a little localized settlement that happened and it opened up and it's done. Now that kind of goes into is it serviceability or is it a real endemic problem? Like the house I described earlier, they have an endemic problem. The house isn't going to, it's not a safety issue. It's going to require a lot of maintenance over the years. So, and you're not going to be able to put maybe fancy tiles down and things like that. So the thing with geotechnical, very rarely have I come across a geotechnical problem that I would call a safety hazard that would affect the house and the safety. It's just you're going to get continual cracking. You can't put firm tile down. You might have to put linoleum or something different down because
linoleum.
Yeah, going old school. You're going retro with this place. Anyway, yeah. So I would tell the new buyer first of all, for us to come out and do a level A assessment, to look at it, drive out there, look at it, etc. It's about $750.
Okay.
But I think it's money well worth it because if you call for the free inspection from the foundation company, it's not free. They're going to give you an estimate, do repairs, and now you have this like ding on like potential reportable kind of thing. And they didn't really give you what's really going on with it. So I think if you have a question in your head, if you see some big cracks and you see endemic cracks, and you really want to buy the house, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to move on to the next one, then have us come out and take a look at it in those kinds of scenarios.
And thank you for saying that, because a lot of times when you go to sell the house, because we have some shoddy real estate investors that like to cut corners, but that will sneak back up on you if there is documentation out there that there has been a report done on the property. So I do appreciate you saying that. So talking about going back to the slab again, and I notice a lot of times in garages that they're much larger cracks because that's typically more of a slab on the ground where the rest of the house may be in a crawl space. This is North Carolina, not on a slab. So do I need to be concerned? Does that need to be repoured? How do you fix a slab in a garage?
There's a variety of ways. So if the crack is in like in Arizona, and I'm guessing North Carolina too, first of all, the slab usually is sloped to drain out. So it won't be flat. Usually there's a construction joint in the middle of the slab, almost like a crisscross, right? Yep. And if you see those opened up, it's fine. They're designed to be there. You want those there. You might need to seal them every once in a while, especially if they're particularly wide, and particularly if you have a lot of people, if you're washing out your garage too frequently and you're getting water in there, you might want to go ahead and caulk those joints. But those joints are designed to be there. Now, I was out at a house a week ago, and it was an older house, and they had filled in a carport, so it was a garage, and the corner of the carport had settled, and now we had this kind of like bowl-shaped broken concrete, and he was wondering if he could get it lifted with a poly lift. And you probably could have, but it would be kind of ugly. So to me, it was, well, you probably just saw cut these parts and have a concrete guy come in and re-pour this portion of the slab. So the repair really depends on what you're looking at.
So we had this one property, and in the garage, there was not the crisscross. Yeah. It was at least an inch to an inch and a half thick in some spots. It was just a crack diagonally in the middle of the room. So I don't remember what we did with that. So I think we just gave it credit at the end. But would you have to re-pour that completely? How would you fix something like that?
It depends. Okay, so one option is what's called crack stitching. That's where they saw cut the crack and then they go crossways with it and they put carbon fiber in there and then they patch it that way. But you'll still see the crack. So if you were doing some fancy concrete flooring or something, you'll see that and you may not like that. But it will hold it together. So if you were putting tile or something like that over it. The other thing I always tell is just get a really good tile guy that knows how to float the crack properly. That solves a lot of problems. I was joking with the guy back in the first house I bought was an old house, 1926. And we were putting some tile on the front porch that had a crack like that. And we were broke kind of college, just out of college. So, I mean, I was using duct tape to float it. So
I mean, duct
it
tape
worked.
works. Come on.
It worked. I know it worked. So there's a
I
lot of
love
ways
that.
that, yeah.
Well, all of this is just such great information. Do you have, you heard me give a badassery bestowment, a little piece of advice to the listeners. Do you have a badassery bestowment that you can give our listeners, just a piece of advice having to do with engineering?
Yeah, I would tell your listeners that engineers would, so when they go to call to get an engineer out, they're going to go to the internet or wherever back in the old days, the yellow pages, and they're going to call a firm. And a lot of firms are focused on big things. And so this is small potatoes to them. So I think one of the things is you got to look for and there's more firms like mine that are popping up all the time to just focus on helping with foundation issues or the home buyer, home inspection assist. So I would say don't get frustrated when you get them on the phone, ask them, they're a big wig firm that are doing bridges and whatever, go, hey, do you know which firms kind of focus in this area, and then help you to get to the right source. So don't get frustrated, because there's a lot of engineering firms just working on really big things and not focused on the this type of work.
I think that is excellent advice. I would also share with the listeners to reach out to your local RIAs, because that's a great way for vendors to connect with people who are renovating houses all the time. And that's how I found my structural engineer, but that's who I would go to say, who can I use for geotechnical or forensic? So Mike, this has been so interesting. I appreciate it. We are going to move to the second part of the podcast here, which is what makes Mike a badass. And I use the acronym BADASS, and the first letter is B for book. What's a book that's made a huge difference in your life?
Well, I think if you write a book, that's got to be the one that made a huge difference, right? So, and because this is called Badass, my book was called Bruises, and it was a explanation of going through becoming a black belt in jiu-jitsu while going through divorce. So I'll put that one as the book. It's nothing to do with foundations, but that did happen, and I did write it about 10 years ago.
It's called Bruises.
It's called Bruises. Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's literary greatness, I'm telling you. So, I would say, aside from that, I like the Stoics. So I would say Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And then if you say, well, what about business books? Because I know that's a real estate game, right? I got my MBA years ago, and there was a book called The Goal. And I didn't think it would have anything to do with anything about engineering. And I've always loved that book, because it really breaks down supply chains, which I didn't think would apply to engineering, and it did. And then the other one is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. I think that one came up while I was in Puerto Rico. And if you're constantly putting teams together, and I know a lot of people think that you're not, but you are, because as a real estate flipper, your team is now your contractor, yourself,
Absolutely.
all those things.
Your lenders, your realtor, everything. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Wow.
I think that was a good book for business as well.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out. All right. The first A in Badass is for advice. You've given us excellent engineering advice today, but what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I always have these sayings in my head that people say something, I'm like, oh, that's good. So I've got a lot of them. I wrote a few down. So the first one I'll do is business. It's storming, norming, conforming, performing. I fall back on that all the time.
Say that again.
Storming, norming, conforming, performing.
Okay.
So a team, when you bring anybody new together as a group, you have to go through that process. And what it helped me to understand was we always have to go through storming first. So if you want to get to performing, you have to storm. And it doesn't matter, even if you like everybody in the room, you're going to go through some storming. And the best thing to do is get through that as quickly as possible. I've fallen back on that so many times. Once I heard it and realized it was the truth, I was like, wow, that's amazing. There's another one I came across years ago. I like it because it's confusing and awesome at the same time. It's never always worse. It's never
Never
always worse.
always worse.
Yeah. And it was these ultra marathon runners came up with it because you're running and you start to get a calf cramp or something. You're like, oh my God, it's only going to get worse. And I have 900 miles to go or whatever. But it suddenly works itself out and it's not necessarily worse. So it's never always worse.
I love
So I
that.
like that one.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah. And then the other one I fall back on is if it is to be, it is up to me. And that more times than I can, because in business, things get hard and it's like, you got to work it out and
Yep.
you can't be leaning on everybody else. So I'll stop with those.
All right.
But
Well, the D in badass is for drive. What drives you to be successful?
I think that varies with age. When I was a young man, it was all ego. And
Oof.
I think jujitsu beat that out of me. And then midlife, I would say two things in midlife was one was providing for family, making sure my family was kids were going to college, all those things. And then curiosity was, and I think curiosity still drives me. I think that's a big one for me. And now I'm 56. I find myself really enjoying mentoring younger people. And it's part of the reason one of his engineer I was working with, he talked me in he's my daughter's age. He's about 29. He talked me into starting this up and teaching him the ropes on it and getting this thing going. And so we just started Desert Foundations about a month ago. And so I've got a couple of younger guys, a couple of younger engineers, and teaching them how to do forensic engineering.
I love the whole mentoring aspect. And I think people a lot of times get hung up and say, oh, I don't know enough to mentor someone, but you just need to be a step ahead of the next person. And teaching is the best form of learning. And I just think it's just another way to propel your business. And I love that. So thank you for doing that. All right. The second A in badass is for aspiration. I'm a big goal setter. So what is a goal you are currently working on?
I would say Desert Foundation forensic engineering. I mean,
Nice.
it's not my first. I've had about 3 or 4 companies over the years, every engineering, and now I even owned a spa. I owned a hand and stone spa. So it's not necessarily just running the company, but then just starting this up from scratch and getting it going while I'm mentoring these younger engineers. So that's my goal right now. Well, that,
Nice.
and I think my wife and I bought a piece of property it's in Camp Verde, Arizona. It's on the river up there on the Verde River. So we may build a house. We're just trying to figure out how to do it without ending up in divorce. So,
Oh my gosh, that makes me laugh. And buying land, and would you need a geotechnical engineer for,
you
like, say, a
would.
septic, something like that, or?
Well, a civil engineer, a geotechnical engineer can do it. So there is crossover. So a geotechnical can do the septic perk test for sure. I always liken it like when I had to get neck surgery, and when I went to get it, I was interviewing different surgeons, and so orthopedic surgeon was what I was thinking I would end up seeing, but I also ended up seeing neurosurgeons, and there's a crossover at the neck apparently. So you could either get a neurosurgeon to do it or an orthopedic surgeon. Similar in engineering, you might get a structural in some cases, you might get a general civil, but yeah, definitely for the foundations, you're going to want to have a geotechnical engineer, and I know a good one, so I think we'll be all right on that part.
Very good. I'm actively looking for land myself, and it's always about the perk test. How
Yeah,
many bedroom septics can I get in here? So, all right.
right.
The first S in badass is for systems. What systems help you achieve success?
Good habits, I would say, and
That's a
then
great system. I love that you said that.
yeah, it's the only one. Years ago, I don't know if you remember that Navy SEAL gave the commencement speech in University of Texas, and they started off with the advice is like, make your bed. And that
Yep.
was yeah. And I agree. You make your bed, and then you have your first win of the day. Like, no matter what happens the rest of the day, the bed got made and you have a win. The other one I always get in is my workout in the morning. I do it in the morning because before you can make excuses is why you got too busy and couldn't do it. Right. So those are two habits I start with every day. And then from there, I've got 2 wins, and then the rest of the day I'll end up how it's going to be.
I love it. I think that is an excellent one. So to wrap this up, the final S in badass is for success. What does success mean to Mike Simpson?
I thought about this, and ironically, I think if I'm successful, I won't even know it, because I think what I want is people to think well of me and not necessarily have to say it. So that's the weird part of the success I'm looking for. I won't know if I got it or not.
And I love that answer because people think, I got to get to this certain point. I got to hit these numbers. And then they hit it and it doesn't feel like success sometimes. So I love that you were crystal clear on that one. So Mike, this has been great. For the listeners out there that maybe have questions for you about geotechnical engineering, what's the best way for the listeners to find you?
You can reach me on my email, which is mike@desert-foundation, no S at the end, and there's a dash in the middle, desert-foundation.com. You can also go to the website, which is the same.
Very nice. Well, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you for everything that you did for FEMA. And I bet that was a huge task to take on, and taking care of the people in New Orleans as well. So Mike, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And that is all. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode. Now go out there and share your badassery. And don't forget, make it a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you for listening to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. If you need more badassery, you can follow Jen Josey by visiting therealjenjosey.com or become a member of RAIN by registering on rainmastermind.com.